Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Griffin, and today's training will cover offer versus serve in school meals. What is offer versus serve? For a school utilizing offer versus serve, the student can decline any food component except part of the fruit or vegetable component. We will discuss breakfast and lunch throughout this presentation. But as a general overview, students must select at least 3 food items at breakfast and at least 3 food components at lunch. This must include at least a half a cup of fruit or vegetable or a combination of each at each meal. Identifying reimbursable meals within offer versus serve. Students, servers, and cashiers must be able to identify what constitutes a reimbursable meal. The National School Lunch Program regulation at 7 CFR 210.10A2 requires that schools identify near or at the beginning of serving lines what foods constitute unit price reimbursable meals. Schools using offer versus serve must also identify what a student must select in order to have a reimbursable meal under offer versus serve. Students and their parents or guardians need to be aware of what is included in school meals. Parents or guardians need to know so they can reinforce nutrition education messages at home, and students need to know so they know how to select a reimbursable meal. Signage and menus should provide clear information about allowable choices. This will help students easily build a reimbursable meal and is especially important to avoid problems at the point of service. Schools are expected to conduct training for cashiers and serving line staff so they can help students select the required food components and food items in the quantities needed for reimbursable lunches and breakfasts. Annual training is required to meet the professional standards requirements. Signage is not required for field trips, breakfast in the classroom, and other venues where signage may be problematic. However, other methods should be used to inform students what choices they have. There are a number of different systems used by schools to offer their students reimbursable meals. For example, a school may have cafeteria style service, kiosks, meals in the classroom, and vending machines. At the senior high school level, offer versus serve is required at lunch unless the school or SFA demonstrates to us with the state agency that their system does not accommodate offer versus serve. This is most common at our residential childcare institutions. Schools are strongly encouraged to modify their meal system to incorporate offer versus serve to the extent practicable. Prepackaged or grab and go meals. So, prepackaged meals are allowed at all age and grade levels. For senior high schools, if this is the only system available for the National School Lunch Program, offer versus serve for all or some components must be implemented unless the school was approved by us with the state agency to not implement offer versus serve. Even with such approval, these schools are encouraged to have some food components or food items with choices and or the option to decline, such as fruit or milk. If these meals are offered as part of breakfast in the classroom, field trips, or for students leaving the campus for work study, offer versus serve is not required, even at the senior high school level. Another common finding is seen during meals at a disciplinary center or for lunch detention. All SFAs must offer all students, even those in detention, a choice for offer versus serve, where that student is allowed to make selections on a menu. Or the SFA must provide the complete reimbursable meal. A 3 component detention lunch plate is not acceptable. A note on fluid milk. For all grades groups, 1 cup of fluid milk must be offered daily. It may be used as a beverage, on cereal, or used in part for each purpose. The weekly minimum amount of 5 cups of milk may be met by offering the daily minimum of 1 cup. There's also a daily requirement to offer a variety of at least 2 milk choices. For this component to be credited for offer versus serve, the student must select at least 1 cup of fluid milk. While water must be made available to students during meal service, SFAs shall not promote or offer water or other beverages as an alternative selection to fluid milk on the meal service line. Water is not a food component or a food item for the reimbursable meal. Although not part of a reimbursable meal, during emergencies, potable water must still be made available to students as part of school food service. If water fountains are closed due to health and safety concerns, consider offering bottled water or other safe options. If alternative dispensing options are considered, send LDH plans for pre-approval prior to implementation. In emergency situations such as these, bottled water is an allowable cost. So now let's take a closer look at the components and items requirements for breakfast and lunch. At breakfast, there are 3 components that must be offered on the serving line every day: milk, grain, and fruit. All 3 components must be available to all children who come through the serving line. On April 25th, 2024, FNS published the final rule, Child Nutrition Programs, Meal Patterns Consistent with the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. There are some menu planning flexibilities in the school breakfast program that took effect July 1st, 2024, meaning that program operators can use them this school year. However, program operators are not required to make any changes to their menus to comply with these provisions. They just provide more flexibility for operators who wish to use them. And we will discuss these changes in some upcoming slides. At lunch, 5 components must be offered: milk, grain, fruit, vegetables, and meat alternate. Foods from each of these 5 components must be offered on the serving line every day. If the food item you are planning to serve for one component did not come in, is not finished cooking in time, or you run out while on the line, you have to make sure you put another food item from the same component on the line in its place. The components must be available to all children from the first child to the last child, even though not all children will take every component. If all the components are not available for every child to choose from, the school will not be able to claim reimbursement or get money back for any of the meals served that day. Now that we discussed food components, let's talk more about food items. A food item is the food that is offered to meet the component requirement. In this slide, strawberries are offered as a food item for the fruit component. Toast is the food item offered as the grain component, and fluid milk is the item offered as the milk component. Although offer versus serve is optional at all grade levels in the school breakfast program, many schools still utilize it at all grade age and grade levels due to the reduced waste and cost savings. So some basics. The meal pattern for breakfast consists of 3 food components: fruit or vegetable substitution, grains or meat alternates, and milk. The age or grade groups for breakfast are K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. There is overlap between the age grade group requirements, which can allow for a K through 8 or a K through 12 breakfast menu. On April 25th, 2024, FNS published the final rule, Child Nutrition Programs, Meal Patterns Consistent with the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. Some menu planning flexibilities for the school breakfast program include grain and meat alternates for school breakfast, substituting vegetables for fruits at school breakfast. These flexibilities took effect July 1st, 2024, meaning that program operators can use them this school year. However, Program operators are not required to make any changes to their menus to comply with these provisions. They just provide more flexibilities for operators who wish to use them. Grain and meat alternates at school breakfast. The final rule creates a combined grains and meat alternates meal component at school breakfast. It also removes the requirements for schools to offer grains each day at breakfast. Under the final rule, schools may choose to offer grains, meat alternates, or a combination of both to meet the combined component requirement. The minimum daily requirement of 1 ounce equivalent and minimum weekly requirements of 7 to 9 ounce equivalents, depending on the age or grade group, remains the same. Schools are not required to make any changes to menus under this provision. This change just makes it easier for schools to offer protein-rich foods like eggs, cheese, and yogurt at breakfast. Substituting vegetables for fruits at school breakfast. The final rule continues to allow schools to substitute vegetables for fruits at school breakfast and simplifies the vegetable variety requirement. Schools that choose to substitute vegetables for fruits once a week may offer any vegetable, including a starchy vegetable. Schools that choose to substitute vegetables for fruits more than once a week must offer vegetables from at least 2 different subgroups. As a reminder, the vegetable subgroups include dark green, red orange, beans, peas, and lentils, starchy, and other vegetables. An important note for school year 2024 through 2025 is that the 2024 Consolidated Appropriations Act passed by Congress in 2024 allows schools to offer any vegetable in place of fruits at breakfast with no subgroup variety requirements for school year 2024-2025. This flexibility is only in place for this current school year. So let's look. Here we see the daily and weekly minimum requirements of the fruits, grains, and fluid milk components by age and grade group for breakfast. Please note that at breakfast, there are 5 age grade groups possible to use. Remember, we can use the K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12, and you can also use the combined age groups of K through 8 or K through 12. The combined age grade groups have tighter margins, which capture the overlap in the age or grade groups meal patterns. The fruit component, which may include vegetables, is a minimum of 1 cup per day for every age grade group. The grain component, which may include meat or meat alternate, is a 1 ounce equivalent per day. However, the weekly minimums vary by age or grade group. And remember that final rule became effective July 1st, 2024, which creates a combined grains and meat alternates meal component at school breakfast. So let's discuss the basics for offer versus serve. At least 4 food items must be offered. All students at any grade level must select at least 3 food items. If selected, the grains or meat alternates offered for this component and milk must be in the daily minimum required amount. And for the fruit component, the student must select at least a half a cup of fruit or vegetables. For example, the school may offer a 1 ounce equivalent of cereal, a half a cup of juice, a half a cup of berries, and 8 ounces of milk as the 4 food items. Under offer versus serve, the student could select cereal, milk, and a half a cup of juice for a reimbursable breakfast. Again, if choices of food items within the components are offered, the menu planner must indicate what choices or combination of choices the students may select, including any minimum or maximum number that may be taken. For example, if 4 half a cup servings are offered for the fruit component, the menu planner must allow the students to select a full cup, but must also indicate that at least a half cup of fruit is required for a reimbursable meal. If the planner chooses under this example, the student could be allowed to take up to all 4 choices. At breakfast, in addition to the food component requirements, there are also food item requirements. Not only must each of these three components be offered, but four food items must also be offered when utilizing offer versus serve. It is up to the person who plans the menu to determine how the food items will be offered. In this example, we have a half a cup of strawberries and a half a cup of juice to meet the 1 cup fruit component. These are each counted as an item, so we have 2 items in the fruit component. We have a 1 ounce slice of toast and 1 cup of milk. These are the other two food items. Therefore, we have 4 food items from 3 components. Menu planners may choose to count a 2 ounce equivalent grain food item as 1 or 2 food items at breakfast. A grain item selected under offer versus serve must be at least a 1 ounce equivalent. A 1.5 ounce equivalent muffin will only count as 1 item, whereas a 2 ounce equivalent muffin can count as 2 items. Smoothies with fruit and milk are another popular combination of food offered at breakfast. If there is at least 1 cup of milk and at least a half a cup of fruit or juice in the smoothie may count as 2 food items for purposes of offer versus serve. A student would need to select 1 additional food item in order to have 3 total items and a reimbursable meal. Please refer to the policy memo SP 40-2019 for questions and answers related to smoothies and child nutrition programs found at the link above. And these slides will be posted to Louisiana Fit Kids. So let's take a look at this. For our breakfast menu, we have a whole grain 2 ounce equivalent bagel, which credits as 2 food items. We have a fresh orange, which credits as a half a cup and 1 food item. We have a banana, also crediting as a half a cup and 1 food item. And lastly, we have a variety of milk choices crediting as 1 food item. So let's look. We have a bagel and an orange. We're going to ask ourselves, would this be considered a reimbursable meal? Let's see if you get the answer correct. Yes, this would be a reimbursable meal. This child selected a bagel and an orange. It contains 3 food items. Remember that with breakfast, we are thinking in terms of items. So we have 2 grains and 1 fruit. Okay, so let's look here. We have a bagel and a milk. Would you consider this as a reimbursable meal? This student selects a bagel and a milk. So this tray is not reimbursable. Although it contains 3 food items, 2 grains, and 1 milk, it is missing the half a cup of fruit. So this child will need to be redirected back to the line to get a half a cup of fruit. Here we have an orange, a banana, and milk. So this student selected an orange, a banana, and a milk. So this tray would be considered a reimbursable meal. It contains 3 food items, an orange, a banana, and the milk. Okay, so while offer versus serve is optional for all grade levels at breakfast, USDA requires schools that serve grades 9 through 12 to use offer versus serve at lunch. Offer versus serve is optional at lunch for all other grade levels. However, many schools choose to use offer versus serve with all grade levels due to the reduced waste and cost of savings. Offer versus serve must be available for students at senior high schools. Offer versus serve is optional at middle and elementary schools. Offer versus serve is not allowed for the National School Lunch Program snack service. And offer versus serve is optional for summer meals offered through the seamless summer option of the National School Lunch Program. So the basics. A food component is one of 5 food groups that comprise reimbursable lunches. We have fruits, vegetables, grains, meat alternates, and fluid milk. The age or grade groups for lunch are K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Schools must always offer all 5 food components in at least the minimum required quantities. A food item is a food that is offered within the 5 food components. For example, a hamburger patty on a bun is one food item with 2 of the 5 food components: meat alternates, and grains. Separate, we have a half a cup of servings of peaches, applesauce, and pears are 3 food items that represent one component, which would be the fruits. Under offer versus serve at lunch, a student must take at least 3 components in the required quantities. One selection must be at least a half a cup from either the fruits or vegetables component, depending on the planned menu. The student may need to select more than one food item to have the minimum quantity needed for a component to be credited. Again, components are the food groups that must be offered every day with each meal. At lunch, 5 components must be offered: milk, grain, fruit, vegetable, and meat alternate. Foods from each of these 5 components must be offered on the serving line every day. If the food item you were planning to serve for one component did not come in, is not finished cooking in time, or you run out while on the line, you have to make sure you put another food item from the same component on the line in its place. The components must be available to all children from the first child to the last child, even though not all children will take every component. As we said earlier, if all the components are not available for every child to choose from, the school will not be able to claim a reimbursement for any of the meals served that day. So here is the overview of the components, calorie, saturated fat, and sodium requirements for lunch by age or grade group. There are daily and weekly requirements for meat alternates, and grains. Reminder, at least 80% of grains offered weekly must meet the whole grain rich criteria specified in FNS guidance, and the remaining grain items offered must be enriched. There are daily requirements for fruits, vegetables, and fluid milk. There are also calorie ranges for K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12 age grade groups. As a reminder, there is no option to do a combined K through 12 age grade group for National School Lunch Program, as there is for the School Breakfast Program. There is some overlap between a K through 5 and a 6 through 8 for lunch. And as a reminder, this is based off of a 5-day school week. Weekly requirements are adjusted accordingly for a 4-day school week. Again, as with breakfast, the nutrition standards that include calories, saturated fat, sodium, and zero trans fats are also a part of the meal pattern requirements. And just a note, sodium interim target 1A must be met no later than July 1st, 2023. So that started the school year of 2023-2024. And a common finding is that a K through 12 school will serve K through 8 the required portions and forget that 9 through 12 has a higher requirement. This is especially an issue with the fruit and vegetable requirements being higher at lunch. So under offer versus serve, all students at any grade level must select at least 3 of 5 food components. And for the fruits and vegetable components, one of the choices selected must be at least a half a cup serving of the fruits or vegetable component, or a half a cup total serving of both fruit and vegetables. If only 3 components are selected and 2 of these are fruits and vegetables, the student may only select the half a cup portion for the fruits or vegetable. For the other 2 components, the student must select at least the minimum daily required serving of the components for them to be counted. So for example, students in 5th grade wants to select milk, a half a cup of fruit, and a half a cup of vegetable. In grades K through 5 and 6 through 8, if a student selects the half a cup of fruit, they are selecting the full component of fruit and thus only have to select a half a cup of vegetable for offer versus serve. And grains, meat alternates, and milk, if they are selected, the student must select at least a daily half a cup fruit and or vegetable minimum required amount. And just a note for K through 5 and 6 to 8, 3/4 cup, and for 9 through 12 is 1 cup. 3 food components are required for an adequate nutritious meal for students and to warrant the federal reimbursement. Within each component, different food items may be offered, giving students many combinations for building a reimbursable meal. An important part of offer versus serve at lunch is knowing what counts as a full component. A full component is the full serving size of the component. If we look at the chart, we have K through 8, the 3/4 cup per day is the vegetable component. And for 9 through 12, a full serving of vegetables is 1 cup. If you look at the fruit component, the full daily serving size for grades 9 through 12 is 1 cup, and for grades K through 8, it's a half a cup. And the minimum full component of meat for grades 9 through 12 is 2 ounces. The reason this is important is that when a school allows offer versus serve and a student of any grade chooses a half a cup of vegetable as one component, or if a 9th through 12th grade student chooses a half a cup of fruit as one component, this is not a full serving for those grade groups. Again, a full serving of vegetable is either 3/4 cup or 1 cup. A full serving of fruit for grades K through 8 is a half a cup. So for those grades, if a student takes a half a cup of fruit, that is the full serving size of the fruit component. But if a high school student takes a half a cup of fruit, that is not the full serving size. When the student takes a half a cup of fruit or vegetable, and this is not the full serving size for that component for their grade, the other 2 components they choose with offer versus serve must be the full serving. So here is a planned menu for a K through 5 lunch. We have a turkey sandwich consisting of 1 ounce equivalent turkey, 1 ounce equivalent of cheese, 2 slices of whole wheat bread with 1/4 cup of lettuce and 1/8 cup of tomato, a half a cup of carrot sticks, and a half a cup of apples, along with a milk choice is offered. As a reminder, raw leafy greens credits as half of the volume served. Therefore, 1/4 cup of lettuce credits as 1/8 cup, plus 1/8 cup of tomato will yield a total of 1/4 cup vegetable crediting for the sandwich. So here we have a student in grades K through 5 that selected the carrots, the apple, and the milk. Would this be considered a reimbursable meal? So in this scenario, the child selected the minimum required servings of 2 full components, the full fruit and milk component, and at least a half a cup of vegetable. So this meal is considered reimbursable. Here we have a K through 5 student who chose the sandwich and milk. So this meal is not considered a reimbursable under offer versus serve. The student selected the minimum of 3 full components. However, a half a cup of fruit or vegetable is not included. If a student does not select at least a half a cup serving total of fruits and or vegetables, the lunch is not reimbursable, even if he or she has 3 other components. So in this case, the cashier should allow the students to select fruits or vegetables from the serving line or have these items available at the point of service. If the student still does not select at least a half a cup serving of fruits and or vegetables, the meal is not reimbursable and the school may charge the student a la carte prices for the food selected. Okay, now we see a plain lunch menu for grades 6 through 8. It includes a half a cup of whole grain rich pasta, which credit as a 1 ounce equivalent of grain. This comes with meat sauce that credits as 1.5 ounces of meat and 1/4 cup of red orange vegetable. A whole grain roll crediting as 1 ounce equivalent, a romaine garden salad with a volume of 1.5 cups, which credits as 3/4 cup of dark green vegetables, and a half a cup of fruit is offered along with a milk choice. So in this one, the student selected the spaghetti and the milk. Would this be considered a reimbursable meal? So in this scenario, the student did select 3 full components, grains, meat, and milk. However, the meal is missing the half a cup of fruit or vegetable component since the tomato sauce only credits as of 1/4 cup. So this meal is not reimbursable and the student would need to be redirected to select at least 1/4 cup of fruit or vegetable to be added with the 1/4 cup of red sauce. Here we have the grain, the fruit, and the milk. So this student selected the roll, fruit, and the milk, and this meal also contains 3 full components, grains, fruit, and milk, making this meal reimbursable. And now we're going to look at grades 9 through 12. So we have a cheese pizza with 2 ounce equivalents of meat alternate, 2 ounce equivalents of grain, 1 cup of vegetable is offered from a half a cup of broccoli florets and a half a cup of corn. 1 cup of fruit is offered between a half a cup of cantaloupe wedges and a half a cup of red grapes. And there's also milk choice available. So here the student selected a slice of pizza and grapes. So this meal selection is reimbursable because it contains 3 components, the 2 full components of meat alternates and grains, and at least a half a cup of fruit. Here we have the broccoli florets, grapes, and cantaloupe. So this is not a reimbursable meal because it only contains 1 full component, which is the fruit, and a half a cup of vegetables. So this student needs to select another whole component to make this meal reimbursable. And here we have grapes, cantaloupe, and milk. So this student selected the grapes, cantaloupe, and milk. And this meal is not reimbursable because it only contains 2 full components of milk and fruit. So the student would either need to select another component to add to the tray or add a half a cup of vegetable to make this meal reimbursable. And we have grapes, corn, and milk. So this is only 1 full component, which would be the milk, which means this meal is not reimbursable. If only 3 components are selected and 2 of these are fruit and vegetable, the student may only select a half a cup portion for the fruit or vegetable. For the other 2 components, the student must select at least the minimum daily required serving of the components for them to be counted. The student will either need to select an additional half a cup of fruit or vegetable or another full component to make this meal reimbursable. And now, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Okay, well, I don't see any questions in the chat. So if you do have any questions, please, you can email us at childnutritionprograms@la.gov, or you can give us a call at 225-342-9661. Thank you.